Hi everybody, I'm meteorologist Matt Gray. Figured we do a brainstorm video and update you on, boy, some serious weather coming this way. And we've got some pretty decent confidence it's going to get a lot colder. We are going to see some snow, but the severity of both the cold and the snow, especially much more so the snow, is a little bit in question. But certainly enough, especially severe driving conditions. We're thinking about putting up an alert day here for Tuesday. In other words, weather that you've really got to plan around any sort of Tuesday plans, or maybe just scrap Tuesday plans altogether, because man, the road conditions look like they're not going to be good once we get into Tuesday. So let's get in here. You saw those chilly temperatures at the end. We'll come back to that as well. So in this period of the winter forecast, winter kind of storm forecast, we're looking for consistency, right? And that means consistency in the computer models that are been signaling to us for a few days, which is pretty exceptional when you're talking about 7, 8, 9 days out, that we are going to get cold, and we're going to get cold quickly. So are the models agreeing? How often? Are there two different schools of thought? Is the setup realistic? In other words, is a prediction in a computer model of 12, 18 inches of snow, is that really that realistic? Come on. And what scenario, of course, is the most likely? So these are the things we're looking at now. This is all part of as we refine the forecast. Here's what we do know, and that's because temperature consistency, especially with Arctic outbreaks, usually is a lot easier. We had one last month that was really, really tricky, but this is showing up very consistently. So here we go. Tuesday is going to be the transition day. Cold Arctic air sweeping into the end of the northwest. Moisture from a storm that's helping to bring that chilly air down. And so this is going to be the snow day. And then after that, the Arctic air comes in, and we end up with wind chill and cold. It's going to last pretty much for the rest of the week. So in the middle of the week all the way to next weekend, or not next weekend, but the following weekend, that's when we're going to have, once again, another invasion of Arctic air. And it's going to be pretty darn cold by February standards. Winter returns. We're talking about at least 1 to 3 inches on Tuesday. But there is a chance for much, much more. There are some inconsistencies in the forecast. There are some outliers that we just cannot ignore because they keep showing up. In fact, they're showing up enough. I'll show you this chart. Look at this. So our most likely scenario, right, is anywhere between 1 and about 4 inches. I would say much more consistently the model's pumping out anywhere between 1 and 3 inches for Spokane and into the Coeur d'Alene area. Now, what's really significant is the chance of more than 4 inches, which is what this chart shows on Tuesday, is 20%. And it doesn't drop down all that much for more than 6 inches, more than 8 inches, more than 12 inches. So there are some big snow totals. Some of these model runs are pumping out. But there's enough of it to where we have double-digit percentage numbers. And at this far out, it's something that we can't just dismiss right away, just quite yet. One of the reasons for that, number one, let's say that this Arctic front stalls out over one spot or another. Well, right where this Arctic air and that colder air meet, well, that's where all the snow and the crazy stuff happens, because there's a ton of lift there, and basically you get these bands of heavy snow and snow squalls. And as you see these things develop over Arctic air, something else important happens. We talk about snow ratio. So that means the colder it is, the more snow you can accumulate with the same amount of moisture. It just is, processed with the cold air and how the snow crystals actually form up in some of these colder temperatures. So I want to show you now the snow ratio here in this purple line right here on your screen. So it's going to be very warm on Monday, warm enough that we'll be in the upper 40s and we'll be seeing rain for the first part of this system. And so our snow ratio would be very, very low as we start to make that flip over to snow. We're talking about 6, 7 to 1 with very low snow chances because it's going to be so darn warm. Now an average is about 10 to 1. But look what happens here during this is the national model blend, so it's everything kind of mashed together, right? So the most likely time frame that we will see the bulk of the snow falling here, which is Tuesday afternoon and evening and into the wee hours of Wednesday morning. Notice the snow ratio, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 to 1. Any stalling out of this front at all, especially over the wrong spot, and all of a sudden, there are some places that are getting some big time snow totals. Another thing we look at what we call the ensemble models. So they run a bunch of times. It helps count for errors. It takes out some of the crazy stuff. It gives us a better picture, once again, of what is most likely. Let's look at this here. First of all, a couple things that I want to notice that are showing up fairly consistently. Number one, Montana-Idaho border keeps showing lots of snow, especially for Lookout Pass. Heavy snow in the Cascades as well, but definitely on the higher end for what we see as far as Lookout Pass snowstorms. Same goes for the North Idaho Panhandle. We're seeing some big-time snow totals. Unfortunately, the resolution of this model not really capturing all the cracks and crevices and valleys here in the Panhandle and really across North Idaho. And so that gives me a little bit of pause. This is probably a little bit higher than what we'll see in reality. But the one thing that is showing up consistently most of the time is that basically the amount of snow between the West Plains and, say, Coeur d'Alene or Hayden Lake, there's going to be a huge difference in that. And by far the snowiest area is going to be in North Idaho, and especially the North Idaho Panhandle. And this is showing up fairly consistently. Now, as far as dialing in those numbers, right, it's way too early for that. I mean, we've got, the models get run 4 times a day, right? And so the regular models, not the ensemble runs, I mean, they're out in fantasy land. This is the newest one today. The 18Z GFS, the American model, is notorious for putting out stupid stuff. And you're going to have to show me days, probably 2 or 3 days of this before I'm going to even entertain the thought of Spokane seeing 10 inches of snow. It's kind of ridiculous, but you kind of notice here still heavy totals right along this Montana-Idaho border, so that's something to watch, especially kind of right here up along the mountain chain in the Bitterroot Mountains. Let's go over to a little bit more reliable model, and that's the European. And notice here, once again, this kind of same area, Libby, Montana, over to Pend Oreille County in Washington, across the Idaho Panhandle, down to Lookout Pass. We continue to see heavier snowfall amounts in this area with a drop-off as you head further to the west and to the south. So it doesn't really look, at least at this time, like this is going to be a huge snow event for the Palouse. And it's really on the fence in Spokane, much less so as you work your way into Coeur d'Alene. And in fact, I would say that I would be surprised if we did not have quite a bit of snow in Coeur d'Alene. And by quite a bit, I mean like 3, 4, maybe even 5 inches in some parts of Kootenai County. Just kind of the way that things are looking right now. Of course, we're still in kind of this exploratory stage when it comes to snowfall. That's usually the last thing that kind of locks into place here, right? So we got a long way to go. The one thing you need to know is that we have the potential for a lot of snow. And regardless of whether it's 2 inches, whether it's 4 inches, whether it's 8 inches, the winter driving conditions that we have not experienced in a while, they're coming back in a big way. And even though these numbers, they're going to move around, whatever actually happens, I think overall, just because we have not had a lot of winter weather recently, I think the impact is going to be the same. And this is why we're on here doing this. We want you to be prepared to get back into winter travel mode, into winter mode in general. I'll end this tonight talking about temperatures. 64% chance of us seeing single-digit lows on Thursday, 62% Friday, 40% on Saturday morning. So Thursday, Friday morning look like they're going to be the chilliest. When it gets up into the 60 percentile range with the computers, even though this box spread is still a little bit wide, not nearly like the last system we had, the last Arctic front we had, where there was like a 40-degree jump. That was, talk about impossible to forecast. That was really something. But when you get into this range, that gives me a lot of confidence that we are likely going to be seeing single digits above zero many parts of the inland Northwest, especially in the Spokane and Coeur d'Alene metro. Will we see some sub-zero? It's real late in the year for that sort of thing in our area. But, never say never, especially where that cold air really can kind of work its way in the North Idaho Panhandle. That's something we're going to dial in as we get closer. I think it's way too early to start speculating on something that's that significant right now. It's also going to be fairly windy as well, so that's another thing we're going to kind of dial in a little bit more is going to be wind chill. Once again, we're kind of in that still that little bit somewhat exploratory mode in the forecast process as we get into the weekend, and particularly by the end of the weekend, we're going to be able to start talking more specifics. So stay with us on the 4 News Now YouTube channel, KXLY Plus, KXLY.com. I'm going to keep you updated on this big change all week, all weekend long. We are going to make sure that you are ready for our big return to winter. Until then, thanks for watching The Brainstorm. We'll catch you with another update this weekend.